Hi, welcome to the Silent Avenger channel. If you're enjoying the content, please consider giving it a like and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Let's dive into today's story. This might be a long one, but I really need to get this off my chest. I've been a cop for 10 years now, and before that, I was a Marine. I've seen my fair share of messed up things, but nothing prepared me for what I've uncovered about my own family. It started with something as simple as a gut feeling. My wife, Lauren, has been acting off for months. You know when someone's too nice, too attentive, like they're overcompensating? That's what Lauren's been doing. Every time I'd come home late from work, she'd greet me at the door with this overly sweet smile, like she was hiding something. Then there were the phone calls. She'd step outside to talk, saying it was her mom or a friend. Fine. But the tone? Way too soft, too personal. One night, I decided to test the waters. "Who was that on the phone?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She flinched, just for a second, then smiled. "Just my mom." She wanted to talk about our anniversary party. I knew she was lying. Lauren never cared about our anniversary. She barely remembered it most years. But this time, she was planning something elaborate? Nah, something didn't add up. That night, I stayed up late, pretending to be engrossed in some case files, while Lauren went to bed early. Her phone was charging on the kitchen counter. I debated for an hour before finally giving in. I unlocked her phone, she's bad with passwords, and went straight to her messages. Most were normal. But then, I saw a chat with my brother, Vincent. Yeah, my brother. The messages weren't outright damning, but there was something weird about how casual they were. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow," one read. "Don't forget to bring the paperwork," was another. They could have been innocent, but my gut was screaming otherwise. Why was Vincent meeting Lauren behind my back? And what paperwork were they talking about? I didn't confront her right away. I wanted more proof. So, I decided to tail her. The next day, Lauren left the house around noon, saying she was meeting some friends for brunch. I followed her to a restaurant across town, where she met Vincent. They sat in a corner booth, heads close together, talking in hushed tones. At one point, Vincent handed her a folder, and she tucked it into her purse. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I didn't confront them then and there. I'm not that kind of guy. Instead, I went back to my car and tried to think. Was it an affair? Something else? My brother and I had never been close, but this was low, even for him. That night, I casually asked Lauren how her brunch went. She didn't even blink. "Oh, it was great. Just catching up with the girls." Another lie. I knew I had to dig deeper, but I didn't realize how deep the rabbit hole went. It wasn't just infidelity. It was something much darker, something that would turn my world upside down. I'll share more in the next post. But right now, I'm just trying to wrap my head around how the people I trusted most could betray me like this. After that lunch meeting, my mind was racing. It couldn't just be an affair, not with Vincent. We were family, and while he wasn't exactly a saint, he always claimed to respect family values. I didn't know whether to laugh or punch a wall. But one thing was clear, I needed answers. The folder Vincent gave Lauren stuck in my mind. What could be so important that they'd meet in secret? The next day, Lauren left her purse in the kitchen when she went out for a walk. It wasn't like her to leave it behind, and my curiosity got the better of me. I opened it up and found the folder. Inside were papers, a lot of them. At first glance, they looked like legal documents, but the names on them stopped me cold. My name. Vincent's name. Anthony King, our father. There were bank account statements showing large withdrawals. Money I didn't even know we had. The accounts were all in Lauren's name, but there were transfers to an account tied to Vincent. And then there was a property deed, some cabin in the middle of nowhere, listed under Anthony's name. Why was our family money moving around like this? And why was Lauren involved? I took pictures of everything. That night, I confronted Lauren, well, sort of. I didn't mention the documents. Instead, I asked her outright if something was going on between her and Vincent. She scoffed, rolling her eyes in a way that made my skin crawl. "Ray, you're being ridiculous. Vincent and I barely talk. We're just coordinating a surprise for your dad's birthday." Another lie. The more she denied it, the more I realized I couldn't trust her word. If I pushed too hard, she'd just get defensive and shut me out completely. I played it cool, nodded, and acted like I believed her. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my mind, the way she laughed too loud at Vincent's jokes, the way she'd suddenly started caring about her appearance, and how her phone always seemed to be glued to her hand lately. My instincts told me this wasn't just about money. By morning, I had a plan. If I wanted the truth, I'd need help. There was only one person I could turn to who wouldn't run to Vincent or Lauren, my buddy John, an old Marine buddy who worked as a private investigator. I met him at a diner that afternoon and laid it all out. The documents, the lies, the sneaking around. I don't want to believe she's cheating, I admitted, but something's going on. And I think it's bigger than just her. John nodded, already scribbling notes. If it's as tangled as you think, we'll need to go deep. Give me a week. A week. It felt like forever. Every time Lauren smiled at me or kissed me goodbye, I wanted to scream, I know you're hiding something. But I stayed calm. I couldn't let her know I was on to her. That weekend, I noticed something strange. My father, Anthony, who'd always been distant but controlled, started calling more. At first, it seemed harmless, just small talk about family dinners or work. But then he started asking weird questions. How's Lauren? She seems stressed lately, he'd say, or Vincent mentioned you were working a tough case, everything okay? Anthony never cared about my personal life before. Why now? By the time John called me back, I was ready for anything. Or at least, I thought I was. His findings turned everything upside down. You're not going to like this, John said, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were photos, Lauren and Vincent, meeting at that same cabin. Then there were phone records showing dozens of calls between her, Vincent, and Anthony. John had also uncovered something chilling, a life insurance policy taken out in my name, signed by Lauren. It was $1 million policy. And then John said the words that changed everything. Ray, I think someone's trying to set you up. John's words hit me like a freight train. Set me up? For what? I asked, trying to keep my voice down, though every muscle in my body was coiled tight. He pointed at the life insurance policy. Ray, this isn't just shady, it's premeditated. If something happened to you, Lauren would cash in. But that's not all. Look at this. He handed me another set of documents. They were bank statements from my personal account. Only, they weren't. The account number was off by one digit, but it had my name on it. This account had been receiving large sums of money over the past year, with payments labeled as consulting fees. It looked like I was funneling money from our family's finances into a private stash. I didn't open this account, I said, my voice shaking. I know, John said. That's the point. It's a ghost account, set up to look like yours. Someone's making it look like you're embezzling from your family. My stomach turned. Embezzling? Life insurance? I thought back to all the times Lauren had seemed overly affectionate, all the phone calls she took outside, and Vincent's smug smile every time I saw him. This wasn't just betrayal, this was a trap. Why? I muttered. Why would they do this to me? John shrugged. Could be greed, could be revenge. Either way, they've got you in a bad spot. If you disappear or get taken out, it looks like you staged the whole thing and skipped town with the money. Meanwhile, Lauren collects the insurance payout, and whoever's behind this keeps the cash. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. My own wife. My own brother. My own father. What do I do? I asked. Lay low, John said. Don't tip them off that you're onto them. Keep playing along until we can figure out their endgame. And whatever you do, don't sign anything. It sounded like solid advice, but laying low wasn't in my nature. I wanted to confront them, to make them admit what they were doing. But John was right, I had to be smart. If they were planning something big, I needed proof before I made my move. The next few days were the longest of my life. I kept acting normal, going to work, kissing Lauren goodbye in the mornings. But every time she touched me, I felt sick. Every time Vincent called to check in, I wanted to smash my phone. Then came the breaking point. I got a call from Anthony late one night. Ray, he said, his voice calm but firm, we need to talk. Meet me at the cabin tomorrow. It's important. I knew better than to trust him, but I couldn't say no without raising suspicion. So I agreed, telling him I'd be there by noon. That night, I barely slept. I was torn between fear and rage. What did Anthony want? Was this the moment they'd try to take me out? I called John and told him everything. "Do not go alone," he said. "I'll be there, but I'll stay out of sight. We need to know what they're planning." The next day, I drove to the cabin, my heart pounding the entire way. When I arrived, Anthony was waiting outside, leaning on his cane like he didn't have a care in the world. "Thanks for coming," he said, flashing that cold smile of his. Inside, Vincent was already sitting at the table. Lauren was there too, looking nervous. The three of them together, it felt like walking into an ambush. "What's this about?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Anthony gestured for me to sit. "We need to talk about the family business." The family business. That was Anthony's favorite phrase for his shady dealings. Growing up, Vincent had been groomed to follow in his footsteps, while I went my own way. Now, it seemed like they wanted to drag me back in. "We're at a crossroads," Anthony said. "There's a lot of money at stake, and we need someone we can trust to take care of things." Lauren reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away. "What are you asking me to do?" I said, my voice colder than I intended. Vincent smirked. "It's simple. Just sign a few documents and make sure everything looks legit. Dad's too old to handle this stuff, and I can't do it all on my own." I looked at the papers they slid across the table. They were full of legal jargon, but the gist was clear. They wanted me to take the fall for their dirty money. I felt my pulse quicken. "I'll need time to look these over," I said, stalling. Anthony nodded. "Of course. But don't take too long. The clock's ticking." I left the cabin with the documents, my mind racing. As soon as I was out of sight, John emerged from the woods. "Did you get anything?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, holding up the papers. "Proof that my family's trying to frame me." With the documents in hand, I felt like I finally had something concrete. This wasn't just suspicion anymore, it was proof. But the weight of it all started to sink in. My own family wanted to destroy me, and Lauren, the woman I thought I'd spend my life with, was part of it. John and I drove to his office, where he scanned the papers and started breaking down their contents. As we went through them, a pattern began to emerge. Anthony and Vincent were using me as a front. If the feds ever traced their dirty money, it would lead straight to my name. Lauren's involvement tied it all together. Her role seemed to be getting my signature on everything. "She's the linchpin," John said, shaking his head. "Without her, they wouldn't have a way to connect you to the fraud. They needed someone you trusted to make it all look legit." The thought made my stomach turn. I'd been sleeping next to my betrayer this entire time, oblivious to the knife she was slowly driving into my back. But the question remained, how far were they willing to go? Would they just let me take the fall, or were they planning something more permanent? I decided it was time to test Lauren. That night, I cooked dinner, her favorite, shrimp scampi, and poured her a glass of wine. She looked surprised, but didn't question it. We ate in near silence, the tension between us almost suffocating. After dinner, I casually brought up the cabin meeting. "So what was that all about?" I asked, swirling my drink like I didn't have a care in the world. Anthony and Vincent didn't say much. She froze for a moment, then plastered on a smile. "Just business stuff. You know how your dad is, always trying to rope people into his schemes." Her answer was too quick, too rehearsed. I pressed further. "And the papers? What am I signing off on this time?" Lauren's smile faltered. "Nothing major, just some property stuff. It's probably not even worth looking at, but you know your dad, he likes things official." There it was, another lie. I nodded, pretending to buy it. "Good to know. I'll look them over tomorrow." That night, I waited until Lauren was asleep before slipping out of bed and taking her phone from the nightstand. I'd already gotten into her messages before, but this time I went deeper. Her call logs showed a string of late-night conversations with Vincent and Anthony, all clustered around the same dates as the bank transfers and meetings at the cabin. One message stood out. It was from Vincent. "Make sure he signs. We're running out of time." I took a screenshot with my phone, then carefully placed hers back where I found it. I barely slept that night, my mind spinning with plans. I needed to figure out how to use this evidence without tipping them off. The next morning, Lauren acted like nothing was wrong, chatting about mundane things as if she hadn't just been conspiring against me. I went along with it, but inside, I was seething. Later that day, John called with news. "Ray, you're not going to like this," he said grimly. "I traced the bank account they set up in your name. It's linked to a series of offshore accounts, all controlled by Anthony. They're laundering money, and they've tied you to it. My head was pounding. Can we prove it's not me? John hesitated. We're close, but we need more. If we can catch one of them in the act, transferring funds, signing something incriminating, we might have enough to take to the feds. The feds. That was a step I wasn't sure I was ready for, but what choice did I have? My family had backed me into a corner, and it was only a matter of time before they made their move. That night, I sat in my car outside our house, staring at the glowing windows. Part of me wanted to walk in and confront Lauren, to demand answers, to make her admit what she'd done. But another part of me, the cop, the Marine, knew better. This was a battle, and I couldn't let emotion cloud my judgment. Instead, I called John. What's the next step? I asked, my voice steady. We set a trap, he said. You'll play along, but on your terms. Let them think you're falling for it. And when the time's right, we'll take them down. It wasn't the cleanest plan, but it was a start. I had no idea how deep this rabbit hole went, but one thing was clear, my family had underestimated me. John and I spent the next few days working out the details of the trap. It wasn't going to be easy. Anthony and Vincent were seasoned manipulators, and Lauren, well, I couldn't tell if she was a willing accomplice or just another pawn. Either way, I couldn't trust her, and that hurt more than I cared to admit. The plan was simple on paper. I'd act like I was ready to play along. Sign the documents, follow their lead, and make them comfortable enough to get sloppy. But we needed backup, a safety net in case things went south. John had a contact at the FBI, an agent named Ramirez. When we brought her the evidence we had so far, she didn't seem surprised. The King family's been on our radar for a while, she said. But we've never been able to tie them to anything concrete. If you can get us something solid, something irrefutable, we'll take it from there. The thought of working with the feds made my skin crawl, but I didn't have much of a choice. Ramirez set up a secure line for me to report updates, and John rigged a small recording device I could wear during meetings. It was game time. The next family meeting was at Anthony's estate, a sprawling property that reeked of old money and even older secrets. I showed up wearing the recorder, my face carefully neutral as I walked into the lion's den. Anthony greeted me with his usual fake warmth. Raymond, good to see you. Come in, have a drink. Lauren was already there, sitting beside Vincent on the leather couch. She smiled at me, but it didn't reach her eyes. My gut twisted, but I forced myself to play the part. What's this all about? I asked, taking the seat across from them. Anthony wasted no time, sliding a fresh set of papers across the table. This is the final piece, he said. Once you sign these, everything will be in place. I glanced at the papers, pretending to skim them. They were even more incriminating than the last batch, clearly designed to make me the fall guy for the money laundering scheme. My signature would tie me to millions of dirty dollars. I'll need some time to review this, I said, handing the papers back. Anthony's smile tightened. Of course. But don't take too long. We're on a tight schedule. Vincent leaned forward, his tone casual but laced with menace. This isn't just for us, Ray. It's for the family. You want to protect Lauren and Ruby, don't you? My blood went cold. They dragged my daughter into this. I'll do what's best for my family, I said, my voice steady. Back at home, Lauren cornered me in the kitchen. What's wrong? She asked, her voice soft. You've been so distant lately. I stared at her, wondering how much of this was an act. Just a lot on my mind, I said, keeping my tone casual. She reached for my hand. You can talk to me, you know. The urge to confront her was almost unbearable, but I swallowed it down. I know, I said, forcing a smile. That night, while Lauren slept, I reviewed the documents with John. The more we analyzed them, the clearer it became. They were setting a timer on my life. If I signed those papers, it wouldn't just be about fraud. They'd find a way to make sure I didn't live long enough to fight back. The next step was risky, but necessary. I arranged another meeting with Anthony, Vincent, and Lauren, this time at a public place, a high-end restaurant downtown. John and Ramirez would be nearby, ready to intervene if things got out of hand. As we sat at the table, Anthony leaned in close, his voice low. This deal is bigger than you realize, Ray. You're either in, or you're out. And if I'm out? I asked, my tone sharp. Vincent smirked. You won't be. Anthony's expression darkened. This is bigger than just you, Raymond. Think about your family. Think about Ruby. I clenched my fists under the table, keeping my face calm. I'll think about it. The conversation ended there, but their message was clear. I didn't have a choice. Or so they thought. Later that night, I called Ramirez. I think they're planning something soon, I told her. I'm going to keep playing along, but you need to be ready. Understood, she said. We'll be watching. It was a dangerous game, but I wasn't going to let them win. They thought they could control me, manipulate me into destroying my own life. They didn't realize they just handed me the rope I'd use to hang them. After the dinner meeting, the air grew heavier. Every interaction with Lauren felt like a chess game, every word and action measured. She was trying harder than ever to seem normal, maybe even loving. But now, I saw through her every move. One night, as we lay in bed, she rolled over and whispered, I know things have been tense, Ray. I just want you to know. I love you. Her voice cracked like she might cry. I stared at the ceiling, my jaw clenched. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to ask her if she even knew what love was anymore. Instead, I said, I love you too, because I had to. The next day, I called John. They're getting impatient, I told him. Anthony made it clear I don't have much time. John was quiet for a moment. Do you think they'll make a move soon? Yeah, I said. And I think it's going to be ugly. We agreed to accelerate the plan. Ramirez set up surveillance on Anthony's estate, and John dug deeper into Vincent's financial records. What he found didn't surprise me but still sent a chill down my spine. Vincent had recently transferred a large sum of money to what looked like a hitman-for-hire operation. They're not just setting you up, John said. They're planning to take you out. The timeline was closing in. Ramirez agreed to let me keep playing my part but insisted on having agents nearby whenever I met with my family. The second they move, we'll have them, she promised. A week later, Anthony called me again. We need to finalize this, Raymond, he said, his tone sharper than usual. Let's meet at the cabin tomorrow. Bring the papers. I agreed, even though my gut screamed not to. That night, I sat with the documents in front of me, staring at the signature line. If I signed, I'd officially tie myself to their crimes. If I refused, they'd know I was onto them. Lauren walked into the room, her arms crossed. You're really going to do this, aren't you? She asked softly. Do what? I asked, feigning confusion. She sighed, sitting across from me. Whatever it is my father and Vincent are dragging you into. You don't have to, Ray. We can walk away from all of it. My heart twisted. Was this genuine? Was she trying to save me, or was this just another part of the game? It's family, I said, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes you don't have a choice. Lauren nodded, her eyes dropping to the floor. I just don't want to lose you. You already have, I thought bitterly. The next day, I arrived at the cabin with the documents and a wire taped to my chest. John and Ramirez were stationed nearby, monitoring everything. Inside, Anthony and Vincent were waiting, their expressions smug. Did you bring the papers? Anthony asked. I handed them over. I haven't signed yet, I said. I need to know exactly what I'm getting into. Anthony's smile didn't waver, but his eyes darkened. You're getting into what every kingman gets into, loyalty to this family. Vincent leaned back, crossing his arms. What's the hesitation, Ray? You've always been a team player. I stared at them, my hands clenched into fists under the table. I'm just making sure I don't end up holding the bag if something goes wrong. Anthony chuckled, a low, menacing sound. Nothing's going to go wrong, son. As long as everyone plays their part. Lauren walked in then, carrying a tray of drinks. She set them down, her hand brushing against mine as she handed me a glass. Everything okay? She asked, her voice steady but her eyes darting between us. Just fine, Anthony said, his tone dripping with confidence. I took a sip of the drink, even though I didn't want to. Every instinct told me it could be poisoned, but I couldn't afford to show fear. So what happens after I sign? I asked, setting the glass down. Anthony's smile widened. You let us handle the rest. Trust me, Raymond, you'll be taken care of. The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. Taken care of. They weren't even trying to hide their intent anymore. When the meeting ended, I walked out of the cabin and headed straight to Ramirez's car, where John was waiting. Did you get all that? I asked, my voice tight. Every word, Ramirez said, holding up a recorder. This is enough to launch an investigation. But we need more if we're going to take them all down. John nodded. We'll give them enough rope to hang themselves. They're getting reckless. That night, as I lay in bed next to Lauren, I realized the clock was ticking faster than ever. Anthony and Vincent were planning something big, and I didn't have much time to stop them. My family had backed me into a corner, but they'd forgotten one thing: I'd been fighting my whole life. They wanted to play games? Fine. But I was going to win. After the meeting at the cabin, things escalated quickly. Anthony and Vincent were circling like vultures, waiting for me to sign the papers. Lauren's behavior grew stranger too. She was attentive, overly sweet, but her eyes betrayed her nerves. She knew something was coming. The following morning, I got a text from Vincent. Need you to meet me at Dad's office tonight. No excuses. I showed the text to John and Ramirez. This could be it, I said. They might make their move. We'll be ready, Ramirez assured me. She'd already placed agents in key positions around the King estate. If this was the moment they'd been planning, the FBI would be ready to catch them in the act. That evening, I drove to Anthony's office, my heart pounding. The estate loomed in the distance, its shadow stretching across the driveway like a warning. I parked near the gate and made my way inside, the recording device hidden beneath my shirt. Anthony, Vincent, and Lauren were already there, seated around a massive oak desk. A stack of documents lay in front of Anthony, and Vincent was swirling a glass of whiskey like he didn't have a care in the world. Lauren sat with her hands folded in her lap, avoiding my gaze. Glad you could make it, Anthony said, gesturing for me to sit. I took the chair opposite him, my posture stiff. What's this about? Anthony leaned back, his eyes narrowing. It's time to seal the deal, Raymond. No more stalling. Vincent slid a pen across the table toward me. We've made it simple. All you have to do is sign, and the money will flow. Everyone wins. My hands itched to grab the pen and throw it across the room. Instead, I picked it up and twirled it between my fingers. And if I don't sign? Vincent's smirk faded. Don't be stupid, Ray. You know what's at stake. Anthony's voice turned cold. This isn't just about you, son. Think about Lauren. Think about Ruby. There it was again, the threat to my daughter. My blood boiled, but I kept my face blank. Fine, I said, leaning back in my chair. I'll sign. I could feel Lauren's eyes on me as I picked up the papers. Her breath hitched, just barely audible, but enough to tell me she was terrified. I flipped through the pages slowly, pretending to read every word while Ramirez and her team listened in through the wire. Just as I was about to press the pen to the paper, a loud crash shattered the tense silence. The front door burst open, and FBI agents flooded the room, guns drawn. FBI. Hands in the air. Ramirez shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Anthony bolted from his chair, but an agent tackled him to the ground before he made it 2 steps. Vincent tried to grab the documents, but John was faster, snatching them off the desk and holding them up like a trophy. Lauren froze, her face pale as a ghost. She looked at me, her lips trembling. Ray. I didn't know, she whispered. I stood, shaking my head. Don't. Just don't. As the FBI rounded everyone up, I followed Ramirez outside, the cool night air hitting me like a slap. We've got enough to put them away for a long time, she said. Anthony, Vincent. Maybe even Lauren, depending on her involvement. I nodded, my emotions a tangled mess. Relief, anger, betrayal. They all swirled inside me, fighting for dominance. John clapped a hand on my shoulder. You did good, Ray. This is over. But it didn't feel over. Not yet. Lauren was taken in for questioning, but the look she gave me before the agents escorted her away haunted me. Was she genuinely sorry? Did she really not know how deep this went? I didn't have the answers, and maybe I never would. Back at home, I sat alone in the dark, replaying the night over and over in my mind. My family had tried to destroy me, but they'd failed. Still, the victory felt hollow. I'd lost so much in the process, my trust, my marriage, and whatever hope I had left for a normal life. But I still had Ruby. And for her, I'd rebuild. The fallout from the FBI raid was swift and merciless. Anthony and Vincent were charged with conspiracy, money laundering, and fraud. The evidence was airtight, thanks to the recordings and documents Ramirez's team had collected. The news broke the next day, and the King family name was plastered all over the media. Lauren's role, however, was more complicated. She claimed she was coerced, that she had no idea about the full extent of the plan. But the paper trail and her involvement in the insurance policy painted a murkier picture. Ramirez assured me they'd dig into her story, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was playing both sides. 2 days later, Ramirez called with an update. Lauren's being cooperative, she said. She's claiming she only got involved because Anthony threatened her and Ruby. She's even willing to testify against him and Vincent. I didn't know whether to believe her or not. Do you think she's telling the truth? I asked. Ramirez hesitated. It's hard to say, but her testimony could help put Anthony away for good. I hated the idea of Lauren walking away unscathed, but if it meant taking down Anthony, I was willing to accept it. Still, the betrayal lingered like a wound that wouldn't heal. Ruby was my only anchor through the chaos. She was 16 now, sharp and fiercely independent. I'd kept her in the dark about most of what was happening, but once the news broke, there was no hiding it anymore. "Dad, what's going on?" she asked one evening, her voice trembling. "Why is Grandpa on the news? Why are they talking about you?" I sat her down and told her everything, well, almost everything. I spared her the details about Lauren's role, not wanting to shatter her image of her mother. But Ruby was smart, and I could see the gears turning in her mind. "So Mom knew?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. I hesitated, searching for the right words. She was involved, but she says she didn't know how deep it went. She's cooperating with the FBI now. Ruby stared at me, her expression unreadable. "Do you believe her?" The question caught me off guard. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I'm trying to do what's best for you." Her face softened, and she nodded. "Okay, Dad. Just promise me you won't let them hurt us anymore." Her words hit me hard, and I pulled her into a hug. "I promise, Ruby. I'll protect you no matter what." As the days turned into weeks, the trial preparations began. Anthony and Vincent's lawyers tried every trick in the book to discredit the evidence, but the FBI had built an ironclad case. Lauren was granted limited immunity in exchange for her testimony, a decision that left me torn. Part of me wanted to see her face the consequences, but another part was relieved she'd be free for Ruby's sake. Lauren tried to reach out several times, leaving voicemails and sending texts. I ignored them all. I wasn't ready to face her, not after everything she'd done. One evening, as I was going through old case files to distract myself, Ruby came into the room holding an envelope. "This was in the mailbox," she said, handing it to me. It was from Lauren. I considered tossing it straight into the trash, but Ruby was watching me closely. With a sigh, I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. Lauren's words were a mix of apology and explanation, though they offered little comfort. "Ray, I know you don't want to hear from me, but I need you to understand. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I was scared. Anthony threatened me, said he'd ruin us if I didn't go along with his plan. I thought I was protecting you and Ruby. I see now how wrong I was, and I'll never forgive myself for what I've done to our family. If you hate me, I understand. But please don't let Ruby hate me too. She's the only good thing I've ever done, and I'll do whatever it takes to make things right for her. I'm sorry, Ray. For everything. Lauren." I folded the letter and set it aside, my emotions a tangled mess. Ruby was still standing there, her eyes searching mine. "Are you going to forgive her?" she asked quietly. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But right now, we need to focus on moving forward." Ruby nodded, her expression determined. "Then let's do that." In the weeks that followed, I focused on putting the pieces of my life back together. Anthony and Vincent were locked up, awaiting trial. Lauren was still under FBI supervision, cooperating as a witness. The house felt quieter, emptier, but also safer. Ruby and I had each other, and that was enough for now. One afternoon, Ramirez called with an update. "We've secured a plea deal with Vincent," she said. "He's turning on Anthony. He'll testify that your father was the mastermind behind the money laundering and fraud." "What does that mean for Lauren?" I asked, my voice tight. "Her testimony is still important, but with Vincent flipping, her role in the trial will be smaller. The immunity agreement stands." I sighed, relief and frustration swirling together. Lauren's part in this mess was something I couldn't fully reconcile. She wasn't innocent, but she wasn't the architect, either. For Ruby's sake, I tried to find peace with it. Meanwhile, Ruby had taken it upon herself to learn more about the family's finances. She was sharp, too sharp sometimes. One night, I found her at the dining table, surrounded by papers and a laptop. "Dad, did you know Grandpa had offshore accounts going back 20 years?" she asked, her tone more curious than accusatory. "No," I said, sitting down beside her. "But it doesn't surprise me." She frowned, scrolling through documents. "There's more to this than what they're saying in the news. What if there's still money out there, money they haven't found?" Her question caught me off guard. She was right. Anthony was too cunning to let everything be discovered. "You might be onto something," I said. "But let the FBI handle it. This isn't your burden to carry." Ruby didn't look convinced, but she nodded. "I just want to understand how they did it. How they got away with so much for so long." Her determination both worried and impressed me. She was growing up fast, too fast, but I couldn't blame her. This was the reality our family had created. One evening, as Ruby and I were watching a movie, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Lauren standing there, clutching a small box. She looked different, tired, older, as if the weight of everything had finally caught up to her. "Ray," she said softly. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, glancing back at Ruby, who was peeking around the corner. "This isn't a good time," I said, my voice flat. Lauren's shoulders sagged. "I just wanted to give you this," she said, holding out the box. "It's things I thought you and Ruby might want." I took the box reluctantly. "You should go," I said, my tone firm but not unkind. She nodded, her eyes glistening. "Take care of her, Ray. You're all she has now." I didn't respond, closing the door before she could say more. Ruby watched me silently as I set the box on the table. "What is it?" she asked. "Memories," I said, opening it. Inside were photos, small trinkets, and a few of Ruby's childhood drawings. At the bottom was a sealed envelope with my name on it. I didn't open it. Not yet. That night, Ruby and I talked about what moving forward really meant. "Do you think she meant it?" Ruby asked, referring to Lauren's visit. "I think she's trying," I said carefully. "But it doesn't change what happened." Ruby nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Maybe it's not about forgetting. Maybe it's about figuring out how to live with it." Her words stayed with me long after she went to bed. Ruby had a wisdom beyond her years, and she was right. The past wasn't something we could erase. It was something we had to carry, learn from, and survive. Days passed, and the house began to feel less like a battlefield and more like a refuge. Ruby seemed to adapt quickly, throwing herself into school and hobbies, but I could tell she was still grappling with everything. So was I. One evening, she handed me the envelope from Lauren's box. "Aren't you going to open it?" she asked. I hesitated before carefully tearing it open. Inside was a single piece of paper with Lauren's handwriting. "Ray, I know there's nothing I can say to undo the pain I've caused. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you can believe this. Everything I did was because I thought I was protecting you and Ruby. I failed, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But I need you to know I still love you. That's the only thing I'm sure of. Lauren." The words felt hollow, like too little, too late. I folded the note and set it aside, unsure of what to make of it. Ruby didn't ask what it said, and I didn't offer. That week, Ramirez called again. "We've tracked some offshore accounts tied to Anthony," she said. Ruby was right, there's still money out there. This could add years to his sentence. For a moment, I felt a flicker of pride in Ruby. Her instincts were spot on. "Good," I said. "Make sure he doesn't get away with any of it." Ramirez paused. "There's one more thing. Lauren's cooperation is wrapping up. She'll be released soon." The news hit me harder than I expected. Lauren would be free, but the scars she left behind wouldn't heal so easily. Later that night, Ruby sat beside me, scrolling through photos from the box. "We were happy once, weren't we?" she asked quietly. "We were," I said. "But happiness doesn't mean things were perfect." She nodded, her gaze distant. "Do you think she really loved us?" The question lingered in the air, heavy and unanswerable. "I think she tried," I said finally. "But sometimes love isn't enough." Ruby didn't say anything, but her expression said it all. We both understood that moving forward wouldn't be easy, but it was the only choice we had. The weeks after Lauren's departure were strange. Life felt quieter, yet the shadows of what had happened lingered. Ruby kept busy, but there were moments I'd catch her staring at old photos or doodling absent-mindedly, lost in thought. One afternoon, Ruby surprised me. "I want to visit Mom," she said. "Just to talk." The request caught me off guard. "Are you sure?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She nodded. I need to hear her side, even if it doesn't change anything. I couldn't argue with that. Ruby deserved her own closure. "Okay," I said. "But take your time. You don't have to decide right away." Lauren had been staying with a relative on the outskirts of town, keeping a low profile. Ruby and I sat together that evening, going through what she might say. "Just be honest," I told her. "Ask the questions you need answers to." Ruby looked at me, her expression a mix of determination and sadness. "I'm not sure what I even want to hear." The next day, Ruby went alone. I spent the hours pacing, imagining every possible outcome. When she came back, she looked drained but calm. "How'd it go?" I asked. "She apologized a lot," Ruby said, setting her bag down. "Said she wishes she could take it all back." I told her that doesn't fix anything, and she agreed. "Do you feel better?" I asked. Ruby thought for a moment. "I don't know. But I feel clearer." It wasn't a resolution, but it was a step forward. After Ruby's visit with Lauren, a sense of calm settled over her, though it wasn't exactly peace. She threw herself into her school projects, her focus sharp and unwavering. I admired her resilience but wondered how much of it was a mask. Meanwhile, the trial date for Anthony and Vincent approached. Ramirez kept me updated, and every new revelation about their schemes painted a darker picture. Offshore accounts, shell companies, even bribes to local officials. It was a tangled web of greed and deceit. "You're lucky you got out when you did," Ramirez told me during a call. "If they'd had their way, you'd have been buried in this mess." Lucky. That wasn't how it felt. The king's name, once a symbol of power, was now a joke in the media. I couldn't escape the fallout, and neither could Ruby. At school, Ruby started getting questions, friends and even teachers asking if the rumors were true. One night, she broke down at dinner. "I hate this," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I hate that they've ruined everything." I reached across the table, taking her hand. "You're not them," I said firmly. "What they did doesn't define you. You've got a chance to write your own story." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I just wish it didn't feel so heavy." The trial began the next week. I didn't attend, but Ramirez called afterward to share the verdict. "Anthony's looking at a life sentence," she said. "Vincent will serve 25 years. Lauren's testimony helped, but it's clear Anthony was the mastermind." It was over, or as close to over as it could get. The King Empire was shattered, and the weight of its fall was something we'd all have to carry.